Right. Oh, it's connecting. Okay, here we go. All right, welcome to the first Whizbanger Show official interview. And I am joined today by the lovely Charlotte Naylor Davis, who I haven't seen in, it's been almost 10 years.
Almost 10 years. Yeah.
Almost 10 years.
Yeah.
And Jeremy Swist, who has been my longtime Facebook email buddy for a long time. And they are here to talk to us today about the Global Premodernity Conference that's coming up March. Give me the dates. So I don't have them in
15th
front
to
of me.
17th.
15th to 17th. There will
Yeah.
be a link in the comments area that I think exists on YouTube. And
That's
stuff.
beware the Ides of March,
That's
right?
right.
Oh, there you go.
We'll start then, and then we'll go through St. Patrick's Day, so that when we finish the conference, we'll celebrate in style.
Yeah.
Get it drunk. Playing Iron Maiden. I love it. All right. All right. Let me give you a little introduction to the conference and read their bios, and then I have a bunch of questions for y'all. So, Heavy Metal and Global Premodernity is a biennial, that's every other year, online conference where presenters discuss how heavy metal music and its culture have interacted with, been inspired by, and commented on global premodernity history and culture up through roughly 1600.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a long time ago. Not today. While heavy
No.
metal in Europe and North America has been seen to interact with Western religious symbolism and draw on classical icons, global metal scenes draw on a diverse range of imagery, folk tales, and indigenous history to tell their stories and inspire their work. This conference aims to create a wider view of the place of pre-modern histories and musical traditions within heavy metal. For many fans, one of the joys of metal is the breadth of this now half-century old. I'm also half-century old.
So I feel
People ask me how old I
age-
am. I'm like, I'm Black Sabbath years old, and if you
Yeah.
can't figure that out, sure, I'll stay 40. Okay, for many fans, one of the joys of heavy metal music is the breadth of this now half-century old global counterculture. The aim is to create interdisciplinary dialogue using metal as a central focus. The program includes musicians, journalists, and scholars from over a dozen countries, Peru, Denmark, Mexico, and Turkey, for naming a few, discussing topics like ancient Egypt, pre-Rome Italy, Byzantine empresses, and the pre-colonial Americas. And the conference is going to be all on Zoom, and we'll talk about, I'll post the website, although by now people have seen it, and there will be closed caption, as we have today, hopefully. Are the captions working? Yes, they are. They're working for me. I think you have to elect for them to happen. Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm going to read your bios, and then we'll get started. Charlotte Naylor Davis studies the Bible as a cultural artifact. Her research specializes in the history of the interpretation of the Bible and the reception of texts through art and literature, most recently contributing to a volume on the science fiction works of Octavia Butler. Yes. She is a scholar of metal music studies, engaging in research and collaborative projects on gender and the Bible in metal lyrics, fandom, and material culture. She works both inside and outside the academy to provide tools of good biblical scholarship to students and community groups alike, and her work encourages constructive dialogue about these texts in places where they are often misunderstood or misused. We just start talking about that all day. Jeremy Swist is a visiting assistant professor in the Department of French, Italian, and Classical Studies at Miami University in Ohio. He earned his bachelor's in European history and Latin from the University of Maine and his MA and doctorate in classics from the University of Iowa. His primary research areas include Greek and Latin historiography under the Roman Empire, the thought and writings of the Emperor Julian, and the reception of ancient Greece, Rome, and Byzantium in metal music. Did I pronounce that right? Byzantium?
Byzantium.
Byzantium. Jeremy has discussed the last topic in multiple conference presentations, invited lectures, and podcasts with special emphasis on appropriations of antiquity by politically far-right bands. Love it. His publications in the area include Satan's Empire, Ancient Rome's Anti-Christian Appeal in Extreme Metal, and Headbanging to Byzantium, the reception of the Byzantine Empire in heavy metal music, and Wolves in the Wolves in the Cryptia, lycanthropy and right-wing extremism and metal's reception of ancient Greece and Rome. Sorry, I don't know why that makes me giggle. And finally, Sparta and metal music's reception in ancient history. And these are in all kinds of amazing journals. Let's get to it.
Excellent.
Are you all ready?
Yeah.
I have to make sure this is actually recording. Okay, good, because I'm like, I have to read this all over again. All right, here we go. Each of you, the majority of these questions are kind of like both of you and whoever decides to talk first can talk. Tell
Okay.
me your personal connection to heavy metal and how did you come to it as a youngster?
Well, I think we should go in age order then. So I'm the oldest. um, my sister was into like big hair metal, right? Like, so she was a massive like Poison, kind of Tiger Tails, that kind of Guns N' Roses, that kind of stuff. And she used to record this really old, like this thing at 2 a.m. It was on 2 a.m. in kind of like British TV. And I came downstairs one day and she always made me watch it and I hated watching it and I was really angry about it. So about 10 and two videos were playing that day. And one was Metallica's One video in full. And the other was Alice in Chains. And I was just like, well, that's the coolest stuff I've ever seen. I'm gonna do that. Like literally it was just like overnight, like, yep, those are my people. I get this, I understand what this is. Um so my so I full on teenage, like came of age in the middle of the kind of grunge Sepultura, Machine Head, that kind of era. And so my for me, metal is very much a place where I express maybe all the things I don't think are polite in general society. Um, it's definitely something I use as catharsis and enjoyment and all of those sorts of things, and that's just carried on. So I now have all these kind of academic ways of engaging with it. I really never felt like there were lots of women in metal. Definitely in the 90s, it was hard to be a girl in the metal scene, and the way to do that was to be one of the boys. Um, but I now have deconstructed a lot of my ideas about gender, and there are so many more women around. And I think if you get into academic metal studies, you get to really start to fight some of that stuff in a very constructive way. And so that's part of how it exists with me now as well. So it's now
Nice.
got loads of layers, but
Nice.
mainly it was just
See, I knew
heavy
this
and
was
I
a good
liked it.
question. But sorry, what?
It was just heavy and I liked the heavy.
Exactly. Awesome. I knew this was going to be a good thing, just good way to start. All right, Jeremy, again, tell me your personal connection to heavy metal and how did you come to it as a youngster?
Sure. I came into it, maybe about a decade after Charlotte did, during the new metal sort of era, late 90s, early 2000s. And it was my sister as well, who got me into new metal bands, Linkin Park, Limp Bizkit, and then I got into Metallica, Rammstein from there. And then, that was my entry into the rest of it. But the thing is, I was raised on classical music by my parents. And I was particularly drawn to the types of classical music that were minor key, that were, heavy and aggressive. So stuff like Beethoven, stuff like the minor key stuff from Johann Sebastian Bach, and especially pipe organ music by Bach and the Romantic composers. And my father is a pipe organist, and so he was particularly. I was basically with my favorite part of going to church as a Catholic would be hearing my father play the organ and also just hearing the Latin during the mass. It kind of created this sort of otherworldly space, which is sort of part of the idea. And I think that kind of anticipated where I went and how metal sort of appealed to me because it allowed me to kind of channel kind of some negative emotions and also to just lose myself in that atmosphere and in that heaviness, that wall of sound. Um, so musically, that it made sense. Interestingly enough, I got into metal about the same time that I started taking Latin in high school, and I became good friends with somebody named Nick, and he introduced me to Slayer at the same time that we were, sitting next to each other in Latin class and translating Latin and Julius Caesar and everything. And then on the weekends, we would go to record stores and and buy metal CDs and listen to the albums each of us bought. And so what we ended up doing is by the time we got to our last year of high school, we actually started this sort of bedroom black metal band about Virgil's Aeneid, about just this epic literature, which had all these kind of like violent episodes in it, the fall of Troy, these monsters coming out of the sea and ripping people apart. And we thought, wow, this is a great topic for metal, right? And so we just made a band about this. And it wasn't very good, but it was just like, the two things just seemed to go together so naturally for us. And then, years later, when I was toward the end of my PhD, I started looking more into, well, what other bands out there engage with this kind of material of literature, mythology, history from antiquity. And I found that there's a whole lot of it all over the place, hundreds of bands all over the world, thousands of songs, dozens of concept albums, and it's just almost growing at an exponential rate, especially since the 2000s. After you had kind of the renaissance of epic ancient history, medieval history films on screen, the metal bands kind of followed through on that. So we can talk about that more, but that's
awesome. You guys already answered the next question, so I'm not even going to ask it, which was about connection to studying heavy metal as an academic subject. We can move on. Awesome. Yeah, that's great. A little bit, and then if you have to help me pronounce Folia's full name. Tell me just a little bit about the keynote lecture and performance, constructing Byzantineness within metal, and it's Folia Silaiko-Soganshi. Is that how you pronounce her name?
I think it's Sowansi, and forgive us for we'll
sorry,
get to
sorry,
that, but
Folia.
yeah.
Okay, so just a little blurb. I mean, there's something on the website that kind of goes into great detail, and I tried to kind of distill it, but I gave up and decided to ask you guys to do it. Sorry. Just like a little bit about what she's going to talk about in her performance, and maybe what can we expect as audience members from her keynote.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, Folia is a Turkish scholar who lives in Istanbul. And so this is a way of her connecting kind of herself as a musician and as a metal studies scholar to, to her surroundings and the rich heritage of many cultures that goes into the city of Istanbul / Constantinople. And so she is kind of using her own band and her own music as a musician as well as a scholar to kind of reach back into that rich history and find figures that resonate with her. And what she has found is, what is interesting about the history of the Byzantine Empire as opposed to the previous Roman Empire is that there are a handful of women who ruled in their own right as empresses, Irene, Zoe, and a few others. And so that's kind of going to be the topic of her lecture as well as her performance, is how she uses music to reconstruct kind of the context, of when those women lived, and kind of almost make kind of a musical soundtrack to that period of history.
Yeah. So last time we did the conference, we didn't have a keynote. We didn't have one because we wanted just everybody to feel quite equal. Quite often keynotes can make it sound like, but what Folia offered us was a performance. And one of the things we found last time as well was that we had musicians. There are musicians involved in the conference and musicians giving papers. So they're not necessarily academics, though some of them are academics and musicians. Was that there's something really fruitful of hearing from musicians about how they do what they do and why they would choose one thing over another. And, and musical kind of like academics, reviewers, fans, we love to critique and judge what our kind of musician friends have decided to do with the topics on hand and tell them how they're doing it wrong. It's really handy to actually have a musician there to tell you why they might make one choice over another. So we're really excited about it because she's going to help us like actually kind of cross that divide between talking about it, analyzing it versus playing it. And because she's an academic and a metal musician, she sort of brings all of this together for us, which is great.
That's awesome.
One reason
And
we're doing this, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Okay, one reason we're doing this conference is, I, as a classical philologist, Charlotte as a biblicist, and our world is very much centered around text, analyzing, interpreting texts, and perhaps images. So we are very comfortable, analyzing lyrics, perhaps analyzing artwork, especially from an art historical perspective. But we are not, neither of us are trained musicians or trained musicologists. And so for a lot of people in our, fields in the humanities coming in, approaching metal studies, we lack that kind of musicological musical perspective in order to better integrate our analysis of the texts, the lyrics, the imagery with the music itself, because it's like it really is about the music, isn't it? It's the lyrics are just scripts. It's that's not the most important thing. However, they are part of the greater whole that we're attempting. And so when we bring all of these different musicians, scholars together, right, we were able to all appreciate and see that whole that all of us are illuminating from different perspectives as musicians, journalists, fans, scholars, etc.
Awesome. Cool. Okay. Tell me about the curated accompanying playlist for the conference. So I had asked Jeremy, well, I think I just sent it to the chat, who, like, if you had a list, because I was like not about to like copy them down and then put it. Yeah, I didn't want to do that, but I did flip through it and I thought it was interesting and pleasantly just disjointed a little bit, which is great because I think when we talk about metal, we've got to like, if we're going to talk about all of it, and we have to include some wild disparities in there, which is just makes it more interesting. So, what was the process like doing the playlist and curating it? And by the way, for the listeners, I'll put the links in the chat. There's one on Spotify and there's one on YouTube. So, who contributed to it, and what was the impetus for some of the tracks? And you can pick like the weirdest ones for you if you want.
Well, what the thing about this playlist is it is the product of all of the people who are contributing to this conference. The organizers, invited every single panelist, every presenter, to select 2 or 3 songs that are related to their presentations. So there'll be various presentations where they actually talk about specific songs, or they talk about specific bands or specific topics. And so by creating this playlist, we are giving the audience who is coming into this conference an ability to actually listen to the music that the panelists are going to be talking about, so that they are able to kind of do their homework ahead of time and see, what get more out of the presentations, what they're talking about. Because the presentation is only 20 minutes, they might play some small clips of a music video or a song, but now with the playlist, you can actually on your own time listen to all the songs that they're going to talk about and get a better idea of what to expect, or listen to it later after the presentation, right? It's there for everybody. And so as a result, we have a whole mixed bag of songs from all those different topics by bands everywhere. And in addition to the Spotify playlist, which is just audio, the YouTube playlist also has a lot of music videos and lyric videos that add the additional element of not just the sounds and the lyrics, but also the imagery and other media that go into this type of music.
Great.
Yeah,
Fun.
it's
cool.
a really mad list. So it is.
That's why I asked when I saw it on the website. I was like, "Oh, cool playlist." I'm looking at it and I'm like, "Sorry, what?
Yeah,
Why is AC Julius Caesar on here?"
Yeah.
And then I
so
the thing
that's kind of fun about the conference is that, I mean, global premodernity is like a ginormous category, right? It's huge. and we have people who are talking about specific bands, and then we've got people who are talking about just like specific people or specific myths, or kind of, we've got one panel that's talking about comedy, like the place of comedy in both metal and kind of academia, and in like and kind of history, and how that's received. When is a joke not a joke? That, all of that sort of stuff. So yeah, you get what you get with the playlist is a complete mixed bag. But the joy of that for me was the first year when we did the first conference. I just discovered bands I never knew existed. I mean, just a whole swathe of bands, particularly bands from sort of the global south. There were quite a lot of bands that kind of used Mesoamerican myths and stuff that I had just never encountered. And so that's a real like plus for having the playlist itself, I think, because you actually go and listen.
Yeah.
But yeah, there are some strange things on there. There's a track on here this year called Ainsley Harriott advises you to give your meat a good old rub, by a band called Great British Grind Off, which is just, I mean, I assume it's a comedy band. I'm looking forward. I haven't investigated because I've sort of heard the track and gone, I am looking forward to learning about this. I'm going to wait until to find out what on earth I'm supposed to think about this.
I love that, because it definitely piqued my interest. So some of the things on there, I was like, all right, I'm interested. And I'd actually, the trajectory of this for me was I looked first at the program, and then I looked at the playlist, which I'm really glad I did, because then I was like kind of making connections and going, all right, now this is cool. Let me register. So I'll be going. Most of it.
The playlist, you know, there's a lot of those really obscure bands that don't get a lot of attention because a lot of them are very regional. And you know, but also we have some, you know, very well-known acts on there. We have a few Iron Maiden songs, Saxon, etc., just to show that, you know, bands from the whole range of the most well-known in metal to some of the most obscure, all of them in various ways engage with, you know, pre-modern, pre-colonial history, mythology, literature, you know, in their own way, some with just a song or a few songs, some with whole concept albums. So it seems to be something that bands in most genres of subgenres of metal are drawn to.
Everything's in there.
And in fact, we're actually have a presentation from Chris Flesher talking about, well, what about the genres that don't tend to engage with this material? Is there something about the definition and construction of subgenre that also includes not just the music defining it, but also the subject matter? That's an interesting conversation to have, that we will have.
Yeah. Did anybody do? Yes, and this is making me think of something else. So I'm not moving away from what you said. You actually made me think of another question to ask.
Okay.
Are there any papers around this of just band names or song titles or album titles that fall in like this category? Because that's what made me think of it. It's like, well, maybe the music itself isn't necessarily part of this, but this imagery or this band name or this album name, song title kind of lands in this arena that we're talking about in terms of global premodernity. Like, so even if it's like nothing on the album, however, the image of this one band draws from this area. So that is somebody already doing something like that. Next time, we'll do it next time.
We do have one scholar, Miguel Reyes Contreras, who specializes in onomastics, you know, kind of the study of naming things, right? And so one of what he researches onomastics, the study of names of metal bands in Mexico. And so he's specifically going to do a paper on looking at Mexican bands that draw from, you know, Mesoamerican, say Aztec, Maya, etc., nomenclature, right? And he kind of talks about what are the trends there. It's kind of a big data kind of analysis, as well as sort of a, you know, what explains these trends. And so there's probably a number of bands, and this is not exclusive to that part of the world, where the only connection to pre-modernity for a band is their band name, because it evokes something.
Right. That was what I was getting at.
Like the
Yeah.
band Byzantine is one. Like I think they have one song called Justinian Code, but the rest of the band's lyrics, imagery just don't seem to have anything to do with the Byzantine Empire,
That's
right?
fascinating.
But because they have that name, it evokes a certain vibe, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. Okay. Got a lot more questions. You told me to move you along. We're moving along.
Yeah.
That was my fault. I digressed. Okay. Well, that was just because your answer was so awesome. It made me think of other stuff. All right. This is your second conference. What lessons are you taking from Global Premodernity 1 into this conference?
Quite a few. I mean, some of them are practical, which is always a thing, isn't it? You do one conference and you like the practical things. One thing is that our conference is designed, and we tried really hard when we designed the first one to be accessible from the ground up. So we're both concerned about things being inclusive and accessible, particularly in both academia and in metal. Like, it's a concern in both of those scenes that there are groups of people who are nearly always marginalized, and who quite often can feel unsafe in those spaces. So that was something that was important to us from the start. So we developed this code of behavior that's not rules based. It's based in kind of how we interact with one another. But one of the things we realized last time was that we hadn't really figured out how to do content warnings and keep people able to do options of like opting out if they needed to in the space, because you're on Zoom, right? We're a massive Zoom call, basically. There's just 200 of us on Zoom at the same time. So we've had to think around that. So how do we make people aware of what's happening in the space? And also in social hours, how do we make sure that everybody gets included? Because you get just a few people in a room who are excited about a subject, and if they're the extroverts like me, I can dominate a conversation without meaning to. How do you pull people in? So last time we had various breakout rooms. We have a multilingual social hour so that people can process in their own language. But this time we've got sort of moderators for those groups. So not people who are facilitating it, they're not ruling the group, but we're empowering the delegates at the conference to look out for one another. Mm-hmm. So we're trying to make it that kind of like, what's the academic equivalent of you see somebody fall over in a mosh pit and you pick them up? So like, what's the cultural space where
equivalent for that?
Yeah, right. Like, I see that you look scared, or I see that you aren't saying anything. How do I bring you in? How do I help you out? So that's one of those things. And again, it kind of sounds, I know it sounds like it's a sort of overbearing thing, but it's more, we're trying to create a culture that doesn't just stick to those kind of rigid academic rules that pretend everybody's equal, but actually we're not. But we actually make it happen. And we make that happen by trying to empower as much as we can delegates at the conference to look after one another and to be involved, and to not worry about like who's most important or not important. Like, just like, let's just get involved and look after one another. Yeah. So that was one of the things that I took really from last time, was people's feedback on how that worked or didn't work. And it worked pretty well, but we've added some things to that. We've added these sort of moderators, and we're like, trying to be as accessible as possible. And we've added content warnings this time, so hopefully people will be able to keep themselves safe, right?
Another thing that we're trying new, and Charlotte alluded to a bit, with the multilingual social hour, as you can see, we are trying to, as best we can, to replicate an in-person conference, but completely online, so it's fully accessible to people who can't travel for various reasons. And as a result, we're able to bring in these people from all over the world. And so, building on our experience from before, what we're trying with this conference is we're actually building in an entire research panel that is entirely in Spanish. The presentations are in Spanish. The Q&A will be in Spanish. And the reason for that is that we acknowledge that a very substantial portion of metal studies, scholarship, scholars, and sort of metal fans in general come from the global South, especially from Central America, South America, okay, and other Hispanophone countries. And so we wanted to create a space where it was fully accessible to them, and not having to assume everyone, can speak English or understand English. They can have that panel. And so the panelists themselves, they will have the option to provide, English transcripts or record their presentation in English, or provide English subtitles if they want. But ultimately the panel is first and foremost for people whose primary language is Spanish. And so we're gonna see how well that works. We've got some great talks in that run, and the chair will be Sol Perez Pelayo, who is one of my favorite people in metal studies. She's a Mexican scholar, lives in Belgium now, and so we're glad to have her back. She presented at the previous conference, and so we'll see how it goes.
I think that's great. I mean, even when you have a certain number of people, a group of people who do speak English and understand English and can engage in English quite well, it's still, I think that the royal we, I think that we often just forget that just because people can speak English doesn't mean that there shouldn't also be a space to hold for Spanish speaking groups, right? And because I know when I'm in a group where people are speaking Spanish, I can understand about 90% of it. I can speak about 75%. But as soon as something interesting comes up and there's English speakers in the room, I'm like, oh, cool, because now I can get excited and I don't have to worry about translating in my head. And, academia, we get really excited about this nerdy stuff. We love it. This is what fires us up, right? And in addition, just like being at a show, telling somebody about our favorite band and why they should listen to this album or whatever. It's when you get excited and you don't have to try to understand and try to speak a different language. So I think that's fabulous. I think that's like an area that,
I mean, I can't
make
imagine
a lot of assumptions, right?
Yeah, I only speak English. I can't imagine, and I find it hard enough to write an academic paper as it is. I can't imagine presenting and writing. And I'm so thankful to my colleagues who do write, come and present in English when it's not their first language. And it felt, we'd had a few people last time who we knew were, they were Spanish speakers, and it was like, let's just slot this in. And I mean, a few people obviously who only speak English have been like, oh, I don't want to miss out on that. And it's like, okay, but maybe it's good for us who are Anglophones to just experience not being the center for a moment, for an hour. It's only an hour in the conference, and having to write to someone and say, I like the idea of your paper. Could you give it to me and I'll try and translate it for myself? Like, maybe we have to do the work. And I think that is a good lesson for us. To have to do that just for that hour. But I'm really glad that we've got it in the full program. Like, we haven't sequestered it. It's just in the program.
There.
And people can come and take part.
Not in the ethnic food aisle.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. Not in the sectioned up into world foods, whatever that is, which is what we have in Britain.
No, that's fabulous. My singing, my vocal coach is Dutch, but she also speaks English and Spanish, and she holds groups often, and there will be all kinds of people in the room, and she speaks English because that's the uniting language in the room for everybody there, and she always says, I went to her group session, we had one yesterday, and she always says, please don't ask me to translate. Because she finds it, I mean, she's fluent, but she mixes these languages all the time, and she always talks about that. She's like, I can't do it if I'm on and I'm conducting, and
it's tiring, isn't it? Like, we know it's tiring because
exactly.
If we had to employ translators, they would swap in, like they swap in like after an hour. Like, that's how tiring translation is. And then someone and again, we've had delegates to the conference from all over the world, and we are incredibly grateful to the ones that come and sit and listen to everything in English and do the work of translating it, because it must be tiring. And one of the things that we do to sort of combat that a little bit is that we have a conference Google Drive. So papers and slides are available afterwards. Sometimes on the day, it depends. We don't want to pressure our panelists to have them finished like a week before, but some will be up there, and other for accessibility reasons. But you'll also be able to get them afterwards. So if you miss a bit, you can go back and you can read it. But again, then there's the multilingual social hour for, again, so that people can go and process and ask an excited question in their own, like, or ask, how would I ask this, right? Like, get help to go and ask someone, because yeah, I couldn't do it.
When people register for the conference, we ask them, what languages are you fluent in, and so we can figure out what languages we should make breakout rooms for the social hour. So we got Spanish, Portuguese, German, Turkish, Greek. Did I say French? And we might even do Dutch. Just it's sky's the limit. Yep.
Cool. Okay, so you've already mentioned a couple times that this is a conference for everybody, right? So I know that is a criticism, a pretty widely held criticism of metal studies, and I would offer that I hold it myself, and which has kept me out of metal studies, to be honest, and which is it's exclusivity and it's inaccessibility. And so I appreciate y'all talking about accessibility, because I don't know if you were in there was a bit of a heated debate that got launched my way, and one of the groups we're in on Facebook, and someone tried to go to the mat with me about using challenging language, and you're using accessible language in academic papers, and rather than making it fluffy. Yeah. And I think this person's response was like, well, we've worked really hard for our PhDs, so we should be able to use big words. I disagree, but whatever. So that said, I'm really interested. I can't wait to hear the answer to this question. What do you want people new to heavy metal as a critical field of study, so outsiders who aren't academics, to know about this conference, and what is your 90-second elevator pitch to get them in the room?
Okay. I want you to know that there will be academics there, and they will talk in analytical and critical language, but academics don't know everything about metal. So they're only experts on their little bit of expertise. And I know fans who are experts on stuff that I've never even thought about. So it's not so much that we just want you to come, but we need you to come, because you have different levels of expertise and a different way of approaching it than we do. Like, academia is one way of approaching a question, but so is fandom, so is love for something, so is creative work, so is musicology, so is being a musician. All of these are parts of the thing. So you will have a question that is useful to us understanding it better. So that's why I'm like, it's not just that I'm like, I love people coming to my conference. Genuinely, people who are fan experts sometimes bring the best questions.
And probably have the best answers.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Dovetailing with what Charlotte said. So in my field of, ancient Greek and Roman classical literature, or, there's a canon, it's built around a canon of texts, Homer, Virgil, Cicero, etc. For Charlotte, it's biblical literature, the biblical text, the Apocrypha, the church fathers, etc. So each academic discipline, is built around, a canon of texts or a canon of knowledge, right? That everyone in that group is expected to be at least familiar with, conversant with. Well, with metal is also built around roughly a canon of, different, the classics of the bands, your Black Sabbath, your Iron Maidens, your Candlemasses, etc. And so but honestly, just a working familiarity with the basics is enough, right? And so what I think is a key to the success of this conference in allowing it to be more accessible beyond us, just the academics, is that we have a shared canon that we are conversant with, outside with metalheads outside the academy, journalists outside the academy, musicians. And the fact that we all have this as a common point of reference with which we are to various degrees familiar is a way to invite people into the conversation, right? That we couldn't do if this were just, just a conference about, the New Testament,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
this is maybe
Or 80s
Testament
Testament.
rather than New Testament or
Yeah.
Old Testament, right? Everyone knows Testament. Most people know Testament. We can talk about
Which
Testament,
version of Testament
whether
we're
you're
going to talk
right.
about today?
So
Yeah.
Charlotte, I
Yeah.
love that you kicked off your answer with, well, there will be academics at this conference.
They will be there. I can't keep them out, guys.
I mean, I
Fair
love
warning.
it because I've tried to resist being completely sour to it. I mean, as you know, Charlotte, the reason we know each other is I said I wasn't going to bring it up. God damn it! But the reason you and I know each other is because I put on one of these goddamn things.
Yeah.
Back in 2015.
Yeah.
Legion of Steel.
Legion of Steel.
Legion of
But
Steel.
you see again, your conference was great because we weren't in a university building. We were in the scene. We were in right? Like we were in this incredibly cool venue. It's the coolest place I've ever given a paper. And you put bands on and we had like people could walk in and out. And it's not that obviously like our conference is set up around paper presentations because it's a way that we know of getting information out there, but we have got workshops and we have got massive social hours where we're all in together talking about the issues, and we have got these performance orientated bits. So there's a conventionality about it. It's not like we haven't like rewritten the academic conference and you're not going to have to listen to something. You are going to, like, we have to listen to things. But the joy of that is, I guess where I'd sell it is an academic paper given by people who are really excited about the subject. And the joy of metal studies is most people who go into it, they go into it because they're excited. It is like listening to your friend tell you about the thing they're most nerdy about. Like, this is just a bunch of nerds, right? Yeah. So I don't know anything. Like, I do not know anything about, I'm looking at our conference, I don't really know anything about Carthage. It's not something I know about. I'm not like, oh, I can do that. I could tell you anything about Carthage. But do you know what? Nathaniel's going to turn up and he's going to tell me why I should care and why it's exciting and why it's interesting in metal. And great. Like, for me, it's so it's a weirdly formal way of doing it, but at the same time, you get to come and hear people tell you about a bit of metal that maybe you don't know about. And that, as a fan, like, and I think probably you're more of a metal fan even like than I am, Sarah. Like, you have to engage with loads of different genres of metal to do the show that you do. So this is just a different nerdy way of getting involved. Like,
I certainly nerd out on the Whizbanger show.
Yeah, right. Also, like it's just
also a fair amount of the scholars coming in to talk about things like Carthage and metal, for instance, are not full-blown metal studies scholars. Okay, a lot of these people coming in are scholars of separate disciplines, ancient history, for instance, who are also metalheads. And so this conference is an opportunity for them to kind of get their feet wet in in metal studies through their own expertise, combined with their passion, which is metal. And so they're coming in and they are not, necessarily fully conversant with all of the literature from the past, 10, 15 years in metal studies, and that's okay, right? Because they still they are still contributing very valuable perspectives based on their own expertise as ancient historians, et cetera, right? And the point is that they are now entering into a conversation where people who do, or maybe more familiar with metal studies can then make those connections themselves for everyone else, right? And so what we try to do with this conference is be a very kind of low risk, kind of laid back opportunity for people who are interested in metal studies to kind of get their first experience with it. And then maybe later on, if they find that this was a positive experience for them and they want to take it further, then they know the people that they can network with in order to, take their research further. And do we want to talk about the edited volume? Or is that?
Uh, 35 seconds, because I have some ridiculous questions that I have to ask you before we go.
Wonderful.
The fun,
Okay.
the more fun, dorky questions.
Okay. Well, at the end of this conference, we will have done 2 conferences. And so we have a lot of material from people that we can now invite to contribute to a volume of academic papers on the topic. And we're already in talks with a publisher who's interested in doing that for us.
Cool. Will people be paid more than 25 cents an issue after 1,000 downloads for the book? Maybe you should just publish it yourself.
The concept of getting paid for writing academic papers is kind of
this is a
I
problem.
know this is
This is a whole nother conversation.
yeah. That's right. You and I can do a whole other podcast, Sarah, on why we're independent scholars now.
Because I'm writing an article now, and I'm like, I've already been approached, and I'm like, nope, I'm not going with no academic publishing.
Yeah,
right,
difficult. It's
thing.
Like
we're gonna end on a positive note. You have to answer these questions quick.
Okay.
Are you ready?
Yeah.
Charlotte. First favorite metal album.
First favorite metal album, Ride the Lightning, Metallica.
Okay. Jeremy, first favorite metal album.
That would have to be Quintessence by Borknagar.
Ooh,
Fancy.
Okay, Jeremy. Most regrettable favorite band.
Like in retrospect?
Yeah, like you're like, I really wish I hadn't bought all those Pantera albums.
That's mine. Okay, so that's mine. Like I am absolutely the Pantera era kid, right? Like it's 1991 and I just want things to be heavy, and I'm Pantera, Sepultura, Machine Head. And now what do I do with that? Cowboys from Hell was my going out.
You can still have Sepultura.
Exactly. Like Cowboys from Hell was my going out song. That was what we played on the way out.
That was my answer too. But I still listen to Pantera. I just do it in secret.
with a bit more thought.
Jeremy has to answer this question.
Yeah, with a bit more thought, during my first few years that I was in metal, as I was really getting into it, during the aughts, right? I listened to a lot of Burzum. I listened to a lot of black metal bands that now I would never consider listening to because they are either actual Nazis or pretty much fascists, right? But at the time, I was very much of the attitude of separate the art from the artist, and that was, I think, the attitude of a lot of the peers that I was kind of getting into this music with, right? And only later on did I think, as I would say, grew up, right? And learned, especially with my work, as someone who interprets text in their historical cultural context, right? You can't make that separation at all, right?
No justification needed. We're all there. So there. Okay, good. Charlotte, what are you listening to this week?
This week I've been listening to Alien Weaponry.
Nice.
But I just kind of love them.
All right, Jeremy, what are you listening to this week?
I have been prepping for the Hell's Heroes Festival in Houston, Texas, in a couple weeks, and one of the headliners is Sodom, which is a bucket list band for me because the last couple times they tried to play the U.S. Was a Death Fest several years back, and they had problems with their visas, or they just forgot to get on the plane. And so it's finally going to come. Everyone did due diligence to actually make sure their visas applications went through in time. And so as long as that darn band actually gets on the plane and steps off of it on American soil, I'll believe it.
Yeah, big fan of the Teutonic Four right here. I've never seen Tankard and I've never seen Sodom, but I've seen Destruction and I've seen Creator about 1,000,000 times. And yes, awesome. Charlotte. Wait, no, you already answered this question. Wait, yes. Okay. Charlotte. If you could have dinner with any metalhead, dead or alive, real or imagined, who would it be and why?
Oh my God. You can't ask me that on a whim.
You can say me.
No, and the thing is,
We've already had
well,
dinner.
it would be you, obviously. I'm trying to think, like, like kind of metal, like, honestly, like bucket list. I'd like to have, I'd love to meet Sean from White Zombie. She was just
Yeah.
the only woman I absolutely admired in my teenage years. Like, she was it. There was hardly anybody else around, and
Read her book.
I haven't read her book.
Me
No.
either. It's on my
Yeah.
list.
Like, so I would like, yeah, that would be nice.
Yeah. What's the name of her book? It's like I'm with the band or
Yeah. Well,
something
yeah, something about that, isn't it?
about the chick in White Zombie or something
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
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 Okay, Jeremy, if you could have dinner with any metalhead, dead or alive, real or imagined, who would it be and why?
I think one of my regrets is that I never got to actually really introduce myself and have a conversation with Mark Shelton, who is the founder and lead guitarist of the Wichita, Kansas band Manila Road. And I was a big fan of the band for a long time, many years, saw them play several times. A lot of my mutual friends have met Mark, really nice guy. And the thing about Mark is he was definitely somebody who in the 80s was injecting a lot of mythology into heavy metal as a theme. Not just like Greek and Roman mythology, which he did, but also, things with Conan the Barbarian, with epic fantasy literature, sword and sorcery, Arthurian lore. He was really bringing that into the traditional heavy metal, power metal genre. That was really ahead of its time, looking ahead to bands like, Blind Guardian that do that. And so I would have loved to talk to him about all that.
Good.
I love this. We're just so to type. Jeremy's like, I want to talk to somebody about mythology. I'm like, I want to talk about gender.
Perfect. Perfect. Okay, Charlotte.
For me again.
When was the last time a band amazed you? Who was it? And when?
Oh, it was The Who. I went to see HU,
When?
not The Who, not The Who WHO, but The Who. HU.
Oh.
And Bloodywood, actually. I saw Bloodywood in Manchester, and it was one of the funnest gigs I have ever been to, and one of the friendliest. Do you know Bloodywood?
No, I've
They're
never heard
like
of them.
they're like a Bhangra kind of like Indian band
Oh,
that's
that's
from
awesome.
they're not from Mumbai. Where are they from? But yeah, they're amazing.
All
Like
right.
last year, I just got really into bands that used different kind of like
Different
their own
instruments.
cultural kind of
Yeah,
musicianship in with metal. But
that's cool.
The Who would
And we're
just
talking about, just to be clear, we're talking about HU, the Who.
HU,
HU.
yes, HU, not the mods from East Anglia, the Mongolian metal band.
Yes.
Yes.
We do like incorporate like throat singing.
Throat
Yeah.
singing and those amazing horsehead like stringed
Yeah, they're
instruments,
amazing.
and like they were spectacular, like beautiful, amazingly metal, amazing musicianship, seemed incredibly sweet. Like it was just a wonderful gig in all respects. It was just like, this is really great, and nobody knew what they were saying, and none of us speak
Who
Mongolian.
cares?
Who cares? And we're all just trusting that it's like, it was just,
Probably
yeah.
not Nazis.
Yes, exactly, right? So win-win. But they were I expected them to be good, and they exceeded my expectations.
Did you love that?
Yeah, I love it.
That
And
was,
they
yeah.
really love playing. The same with Bloodywood. Like, they clearly were just having the
They're just
times of
having
their
so
life.
much fun.
And I love it
Yeah.
when a band look like they really want to be there, and
Yeah.
they're like really into it. So
Awesome. What about you, Jeremy? When was the last time a band amazed you? Who was it and when?
This was last year in my hometown of Boston, when shortly after Merciful Fate reunited. And they did a US tour with Creator. and Midnight.
Wow.
And they opened for them, and
Wait, Midnight Creator and Merciful
and
Fate. My kid
Merciful
went to
Fate were the
that show.
headliner, right?
Yeah,
And
I saw
so,
Merciful Fate too last 2 weeks
and
ago.
it was, it was me and all of my friends in the Boston area music scene, metal scene, all in this space right by Funway Park. And it just sounded incredible. It was probably might be the best metal performance I ever witnessed. King Diamond sounded better than ever, and he does. Right. It's just everything was perfect. Sounded exactly on like on album, and had an amazing stage kind of setup and everything. And they opened with The Oath, which is not just my favorite Merciful Fate song, but might be my favorite metal song of all time. It's just it was just perfect.
Yeah.
And what more can I say? It was just, I never thought I would ever see Merciful Fate play in my life, and they just blew me away.
Merciful Fate was one of my first favorite bands. They were the band that kind of turned me was wow. It just went right out of my head. Celtic Frost.
There you go.
When I was 15, and at that time, it was 1985. The heaviest around was probably Exodus. And there just wasn't we listened to heavy metal, and I don't even think thrash was thrash yet, and punk rock and speed metal. Maybe thrash was thrash, I think at that point. But then speed metal. There wasn't all this other stuff. And oh my God, yeah, I heard Celtic Frost and I lost my mind. That was my first, they turned me. And then Venom came out and I was like, cool, yeah, I love Venom. But then it was Merciful Fate and I was like, what magic is this?
Yeah.
And wow, yeah, around that same time, it was I was 14, 15, so 84, 85 was Celtic Frost and Merciful Fate. And I got to see, not Hellhammer, what's Warriors bands?
Triptychon?
No. Oh my God. What is his band called?
The one that plays Hellhammer songs?
Yeah. Triumph of Death. We saw them and I cried. I will admit it. I cried like a little baby. I was they were so amazing. And then that was 4 years ago. And then 2 years ago, I did see Merciful Fate. And it was at Barcelona Rock Fest in Spain, and 3 years ago, I can't remember. Anyway, that was the whole reason. I mean, even Judas Priest, my favorite band in the entire world, played, and I'm like, yeah, but Merciful Fate is playing. And Jeremy, it was the same. They were absolutely unbelievable, perfect. The sound was great, but the energy on the stage, it was no time had passed. It was so good. The only regret I have is that Nashville Pussy was playing at the same time on the other stage, and I was really angry about that because they're one of my favorite bands of all time. Yeah. Okay, good. Awesome. Okay. Just 2 more questions for each of you. Jeremy, what's your favorite genre of metal?
Oh, jeez.
Today.
Today. Yeah, that's right. This week. Don't pin yourself down.
God,
Come on.
just
Let's go.
epic power doom metal stuff like Atlantean Codex and Smolder, a lot of more recent stuff where it's just big walls of sound, great riffs, and just epic subject matter, soaring vocals, great musicality, but also just the right kind of sound. Just
I'll give you that. I'll let you have that. I think it's a little bit of a cheat, but that's okay. It's how many things can I tack together in one? Charlotte.
Well, I've already proved that I'm the most basic person here, right? There's something about my age group that lies me.
Unless you're saying basic as a wildly amazing compliment.
Just but no, I mean, if I have to choose one, if you were going to go right, you can only have one genre. I'm just going.
We are on a desert island. You have one genre. What is it?
I'm going straight death metal. I'm going I'm going Carcass and out, right? All right. I want to feel like you might rip my guts out, and also I can just chug along to this.
But then you'll feel safe there too.
Yeah, right. Yes, that's it. Like, yeah, there's something about death metal that's, you know, you said like there was a point you knew what you were into, and then like Merciful Fate came in, and that's a like
Yeah.
I was the same. Like I was totally into, like I'd been really into obviously like grunge stuff, Alice in Chains and people like that, because that's exactly what was around at the time. And then Machine Head, Pantera, I've told you all of that. And then Carcass brought Heartwork out, and it was like, oh, there's a whole other genre here that I could go.
exactly.
And I just went full, like I just was like, that was the point at which my mother said, I really can't, like, I don't mind, but I can't tell what they're saying. Up till then, she'd been like, this is great, I love this. But she was like, yeah, this maybe.
But then you can share the lyrics to a Carcass song, and it's like, oh, this is actually really
Basically a medical
creative.
dictionary.
It's great.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
like that's right. It's just a medical.
And there's nothing quite.
Here's an anatomy book, and this is what.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Look at all the stuff I'm learning, Mom.
Yeah, like right.
About the human
It's
body.
educational.
Why we should.
Yeah, like.
I studied Latin and Greek so that I can understand Carcass lyrics.
Exactly. There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's nothing quite like a Carcass pit.
Oh yeah, I mean I saw them
Wow.
2 years ago in Leeds,
mind.
just after Torn Arteries had come out, I think, and it was just like it was magnificent. They were they were fabulous.
Agreed.
Like,
Okay. Last question. What's the next show you're going to?
I don't have one. Do you know why? Because Carcass are playing in Leeds on the Friday of our conference. This is how much I love our conference, Jeremy. You've got to understand.
But you can just zoom in from the show.
That's right. Just do the math.
You can actually. We live in a world now where you can be in two places at once.
If I weren't chairing on the Friday, I would. There's a part of me that's like I would zoom in from the show. But yeah, that is how much I love our. So I after that, I don't think I've got anything in, because I can't think past the conference. You know what it's like. I've got this one thing I've got to do after that. But Jeremy's probably got like most of his summer planned out with gigs. So.
Well, I already, I'm going to be in Italy this summer. I already saw that I'll be able to catch Vader on tour when they play in Bologna. But before that, the weekend after the Premodernity Conference is Hell's Heroes, the 3-day metal festival in Houston, Texas. That I already talked about. Sodom's one of the headliners. There's also going to be, Queensryche and Candlemass, and just like dozens of other amazing bands that I'm really excited for. So that's obviously where I'll be. I'm actually going to be driving down from Cincinnati and then making it kind of a spring break trip.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, we have come to the end of our hour. We tacked a few more minutes on there, but that was great. I didn't even get to, I still had more questions, but I think we covered a lot. Yeah. Thank you both so much. Oh. Any last words for the audience?
Please come to the conference. Yeah. Please register. You do have to register, but when you register, you'll get the Zoom link just before the conference, and then you can attend for as much as you want, as little as you want, and we'd really love to have you.
Yeah, if you haven't tried one conference before, come to this one.
Yeah, and it's free.
So the social is free. It's online. You can leave if you hate it, but the social hours are a full hour long. If
you don't have to leave your house.
You don't have to leave your house, and like those are set up around my disability and my need to have a lie down and a big cup of tea. So like you can totally do those things.
Charlotte can go. You can go.
We show people our pets.
Yeah, we're very pet orientated.
Yeah.
I will be there. I think I might actually be able to go to the whole thing, but we'll see. All right. Thank you both so much. Hang out for a second.
Thank you.
After I stop recording, just give me a second. But thank you both so much. I have one favor to ask each of you. Do a little spot for the Whizbanger show. Charlotte, you go first.
What do you mean? I was like, what do you mean?
Your name, the conference. They're listening to the Whizbanger show. It's awesome.
Okay. I'm Charlotte. Yeah, I'm Charlotte Naylor Davis, and you're listening to the Whizbanger show. Come to our conference and hear about it on Sarah's show today.
Hi, I'm Jeremy Swist, also co-organizing the Heavy Metal and Global Premodernity Conference, talking about it here on the Whizbanger show. So please tune in and hear what it's all about.
Oh, perfect. All right. See you guys later. Hang out. Don't leave yet. But we're saying goodbye to all the people. Bye, people.
Bye,
Bye,
people.
people.
All right. Bye.